Welcome to the second episode of our Orbital Blues series, everyone. We have game designer Sam Sleney with us today to begin creating characters with us. But before we get to that, here's what to expect in our calls to action. You can join me here after the show to hear all about another brand new show on the One Shot Network, and one I am extremely excited for everyone to hear. Starwhal Odyssey is starting its public launch tomorrow with 2 full-length episodes right out the bat. We'll have more information about this, as well as a brand new Kickstarter launching tomorrow that would be of interest to those that are fans of the network. In addition to that, we also have our normal Patreon info, as well as our patron thank yous. With all of that out of the way, enjoy the show, everyone. Last time on Character Creation Cast, Sam walked us through what this game was all about, and we were just about to dive into the history of the game before getting to character creation. We're picking up right where we left off last time. Enjoy. Speaking of the history of the game, I did a little digging on the wikis, found that the game kickstarted in May of 2021, successfully, of course.
Gosh, that long ago.
Released in quite a while ago.
Yeah,
released in 2022.
Years have been like a millennia and also 1 month long.
Exactly.
They're a blur. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So my question was, when did you actually start designing the game, and what sparked the desire to create this this space western?
Did you say it was kickstarted in May 2021?
Yeah, way back then.
Oh my god. Wow. It probably started then. It probably started then, probably around the beginning of 2020, because I know that we worked on the book and we wanted to get it into a finished manuscript state before the Kickstarter ever even went live. Because that's how Soul Muppet do their books. That's how Zach wanted to approach it as a publisher, and that's how I wanted to approach it as a writer as well. I don't believe in kickstarting something before it's finished. I have issues with that. I think that in a lot of industries, like video games industry, rallies against like do not pre-order until it's done, or just don't pre-order in general. And I think sometimes we don't hold RPGs to the same level of scrutiny sometimes. And so Zach and I were just big believers in it should be finished by the time we take it to Kickstarter, and Kickstarter is the way that people pay for it to be physically printed and shipped, because everything prior to that has already been done out of Soul Muppets, like money that they have from other projects, etc.
I think that sets you up for way more success on something like Kickstarter too, because people are very like, okay, when's it coming? When's it coming? When's it coming? And I certainly leave room for stuff, because it's like a lot of times it's a very small creative team. It's people, I'm very forgiving,
and sometimes art needs to be paid for, or more art needs to be paid for, or stretch goals are sometimes the real meat of a project, and the prior to that, it is literally paying for printing costs, etc. I mean, it's strange to talk about it now because it's only 3 or 4 years later, but the world was a different place in 2021 and things cost different amounts. We've had a major paper shortage since then. Kickstarter
the supply chain issues just
Kickstarter's had various policy changes. Some people left the platform, no longer use it, have moved to different things. So, but back then it was a case
diaspora of like everything on the internet, from social media to Kickstarter. It's like now we're using BackerKit, now we're using this. Like
this will be recorded onto a cassette and mailed out to a select number of people.
Yeah, that's how we're putting out our podcast now. Actually, if you subscribe, you'll get one in the mail, like the old school Netflix.
Yeah.
If only.
So I would say probably started development 2020. Again, if Zach was here, he'd probably be able to say when that first meeting happened in that pub prior to lockdown, where we sort of brainstormed it. And then it just kind of was like, I know that there was a manuscript in existence when lockdown was enacted here in the UK. And it was written pretty much like in the same spot on my home computer. And what playtesting it did get was all done virtually, or with a very select group of people that were in our bubbles towards the end when things started getting lifted. And it was a lot of Discord meetings and things done. It kept us all busy though and stopped us from all going crazy.
I was going to ask about that. Do you feel like it was like something that sort of like kind of sustained you? Because I know a lot of people during the pandemic were like, okay, now I'm going to pour myself into creative projects and doing the things that I couldn't do before, and trying to do some of that to kind of keep yourself sane. So was this something like that? And then was this your first game design experience, or like had you done stuff before, and so this was a new way of having to do it too?
So in answer to the first part of that question,
that was two things.
Yeah, it's all right. I had been working from home prior to the lockdown for a good 2 years before it was the norm. And I had kind of gone through the ringer mentally prior to there being a lot of support and help for home working and guides on how to do it, etc. Then lockdown happened and everyone was doing it, and everyone had articles and guides on how to do it. But I had already gone insane by that point. They merely adopted the darkness. I was born in it. And so Orbital Blues was just another thing to do. At my home office, at my computer. But it was a good way to sort of keep connected with people, having meetings with people, talking to people, sharing ideas creatively, sort of ticking that box and filling that niche for, human connection through RPGs that we that we took for granted before and probably are beginning to take for granted again, post lockdown. Would I say it's a product of lockdown? No, I don't think so. And there's no themes or much in there other than a kind of a sense of isolation that you get in space media anyway. This is something that I think would still exist. I know this won't have a video by the end of this, but I'm holding up Orbital Blues to the camera. This would still exist had the pandemic and lockdown happened. This would still probably look exactly the same as it does and be the exact same game that it is, had that not happened. So it was just something that was made then in that time. But yeah, I would say it probably did help us out more than we realize, or more than we can are in a position to consider now looking back on it. As for,
I know for a lot of people, especially doing group projects and stuff, I think. I think Ryan and I felt that way about our podcasting stuff too. We've always done it remote. We live in different cities. But it was something that when I wasn't getting any social time anywhere else, it kind of forced us to have a scheduled social time every week. It was okay, well, we have this thing to work on, so we can't really kind of crawl back into yourself, and it forced you to keep some of that up, even though. And honestly, because we're we always do it remotely anyway, too, I think there was a sense of normalcy to that it didn't feel weird. Like my work meetings, which I was now doing online and everything. This was something we were already doing online. So it kind of kept things steady.
Yeah. It gives you that sense of normality to have a routine. And we were meeting, either every couple of days or every week, depending on how busy we were in the schedule of it. And we would just workshop this book very tightly. Myself, Josh, Zach, Lone Archivist, who did the layout, and sometimes we would just go through what we had up to that point, page by page. And I think when I say, is it a product of lockdown? No. Do I think it was kind of tempered and made better by the conditions of lockdown? Yes. Simply because, we had that time to focus on it, and everyone says it's such a fantastic looking book. And I think us all having a part to play and something to say and talking to each other virtually over Discord and such throughout that time really helped strengthen it in a way that it might not otherwise have been. As for, is this the first thing like this that I've done? No, I used to work for a company called First Falling Leaf, which was a little outfit that some friends of mine set up, and I came on board as part of to make role-playing games, or rather to publish their kind of home brews and original ideas that they had done. And I joined that actually probably whilst I was in college, and did that whilst I was at university, and we made a game called Sins, which is very it's very trad. It's a couple of inches thick. It's 400 pages. It's very crunchy. It's a post-apocalyptic supers game, essentially, where you play as nemesaries, these kind of reborn individuals back from the dead to kind of bring some form of order back to this really broken world. This was written way before lockdown, by the way. This was there's no themes there. This predated that by quite a bit. That is now published by Nightfall Games. All of our names are still on it. If you go to that looking for any kind of Orbital Blues themes that may have, because I did both things, you will be sorely disappointed. It sounds like a total
departure.
You'll be sorely disappointed. If you like Orbital Blues, don't look into it. I'm going to do a reverse plug.
If you hated everything about this episode, have we got a game for you?
Yeah. Sometimes I am guilty of whenever I go on. So I only go on Reddit to find out the answers to questions that someone else will inevitably already asked. Some kind of tech problem, or some kind of issue with a game, or some kind of balancing question for an RPG or something like that.
I look at tips for Roller Coaster Tycoon on there a lot, because I'm playing the first one from when I was a kid, and I'm I don't understand.
Sometimes I am guilty of looking at r/RPG and see if anyone mentions Orbital Blues, and sometimes they do, and sometimes it's posts I hear a lot about this. What's the deal with it? Why do people like it? And I have never posted. I've never posted in my life. But if I had an answer to those people who sometimes post it and go, I played this and it mechanically wasn't deep enough for me, or this wasn't crunchy enough, then go find yourself a copy of Sins from Nightfall Games. And that is a very crunchy game. That is a very mechanically dense game that I worked on when I was just starting out in RPGs, and it taught me a lot about what I like in games. And it does have some storytelling elements. It does have some kind of role play for XP kind of things, like your anima in that, which is kind of your mana, or your energy, whatever you want to call it. The way you get that back is by affecting the emotions of others, having a positive or a negative effect on people's lives, which will in turn give you light, dark, or neutral anima that you can use on your powers. On the flip side to that, I also, like, from making that, realized I do not like crunchy combat, and therefore did not want to make a game that had crunchy combat. Again, there's a talent in that called Capricious Luck, where once per session, you can change the role of another player at the table at will, but once per game, someone else at the table can change one of yours whenever they want. And that was just like a fun little mechanic that in like my like years long campaign of that, someone shouting out Capricious Luck and pointing at somebody aggressively became a really big sort of like, whoa sort of moment at the table in a sort of like soft PvP kind of way, like, oh, you really proud of that role? Capricious Luck. Like, oh, you know what? I'm feeling benevolent today. Capricious Luck that. And it's like, it's things like that that kind of affect you as a designer and creator. What are those things that we were hooting and hollering about, and how do I replicate those or make more of them for other people to enjoy at their tables? How do I build on them, etc.? So yeah, I'm kind of like a renaissance man when it comes to RPGs. I do writing, I do some mechanics, vibes. I had a hand in like the art direction and stuff. There's some cute little like sketches that exist of like the cover, for example. I sketched a very rough design of what I thought the cover should look like, and then Josh just transformed it phenomenally. But it's like it's fun to do every part of the process. But if we're to have name tags and little pigeonholes, I'm very much the words and vibes guy. Zach was the mechanics guy, and Josh was the arts guy. All gender identity neutral terms there in the use of the word guy. Person, people, team member. So yeah, I have done RPGs before, and I will probably do RPGs again in the future. Orbital Blues took a lot out of me at the time, just because of the scale of the work and the state of the world at the time when we produced it. Doing Afterburn, the Orbital Blues follow-up recently, has again taught me more lessons in what I enjoy and what parts of the process I find easy, what parts of the process I find harder. And yeah, I will probably do games again in the future, but I'm in that phase now where, like, you know, it's that feeling of finishing a book as a reader. You don't know what you want to go to next. You kind of just need some time to sit and stew on it. And something will come along.
Well, it's got to be something you're passionate about too. It's like you don't want to just go and you're like, okay, well, time to make another one.
Gotta
like,
make games, gotta churn out games, gotta do shovelware
meet those
games.
Expectations. Yep.
For sure. For sure.
Yeah, because otherwise you just end up with just chaff coming out, and it's just not.
Yeah, that's how you end up with something like Palladium.
Yeah, you just don't want something soulless. And I think we all poured a lot of heart and soul into Orbital Blues, and it shows. And we have like reaped the rewards in that, in the sense that, like, you know, it's very popular, people enjoy it. But
it seems like there's room to like play around in it. So like, especially like, you know, if you've made Afterburn and things like that, that there are still some kind of ideas percolating, and like, you know, like am I completely done with this thing either? Or like, do I still have some niggling bits in the back of my head that are, you know?
And there's ideas and concepts in Afterburn that just didn't exist mentally at the time when we first wrote Orbital Blues. For example, there's a mechanic in an optional mechanic in Afterburn called Warmth, which is kind of like an opposite to Blues, and it's kind of like good feelings and a sense of inner peace and acceptance of your circumstances, and a sense of belonging with this found family that is your crew. And it's a way to positively retire your character of, okay, have made peace with the life that I have, and I'm tapping out because I'm at an equilibrium of the good and the bad in my life.
Is that something that came from like just so you make the main game and then like the more you interact with it and people playing it and playtesting it and stuff, is that kind of like where that came from that process? That you were like, there is more here.
The warmth mechanic is one of the parts of Afterburn that Zach wrote, and they wanted a way for characters to retire in a way that wasn't, death or burning out or whatever, and just sort of like, having this kind of inner peace from the found family that is the crew, or maybe achieving what it was that they set out to do. And, you can say, oh, well, I don't need mechanics to do that. I can just, role play that out.
But I like the idea that it's there, especially because those emotions are so important to the main game. That I like the idea that there would be mechanics for something like that, because even if you don't need them, sometimes it's nice to have a game say like, hey, this is a thing that you can or should do too. It's like you can do anything in tabletop games, but sometimes it's nice to have the support of the game saying, we recommend this or we endorse this too.
Yeah. But on the flip side to that, whilst that was something that came from an internal design process from Zach, one that came a little bit more externally was pretty much as soon as we launched, there were people being like, can I play as a robot? Can I play as an android? I think Blade Runner 2049 was around the time or just prior to. Androids were very much the in thing, and robots were very much the in thing back then. I think a series of Westworld had just dropped or something. Time is weird. But a lot of people were asking about that. And it was something that I had wanted to put in the book, but it was a taller order than what we had space for at the time. And also we were very honed in on this idea of making Interstellar Outlaws be very human characters. And being an android felt very much like a whole other thing in itself, in the same way that there are no aliens in the core book. There's no like people with big prosthetic heads in a Star Trek kind of way. It's all just humans. And we did that from a perspective of, we want all of the problems in this galaxy to be human problems caused by people being people, not, oh, this is a problem caused by this aliens, but being aliens. We wanted, because it's sometimes you can sacrifice depth or risk trivializing or being reductive when you introduce things like that.
I think it introduces
human
like
problems caused
vibe.
by humans. And I guess at the time, androids felt like, well, if we do androids, we then have to cover a bunch of other like social, economic, and moral things of machines that will connect like people. And it just didn't really fit or like cross our minds enough then. But then after we launched and people were asking for androids, one of the first things I said to Zach was like, I want to do it. I want to like go back to the drawing board for androids. And and then another thing was ship combat, and what your ship can do. And the way that we did ship combat in the book, or the way Zach built ship combat mechanically, is really engaging. We didn't want just the pilot to be making rolls, so it uses like a cooperative system where everyone gets to do bits on the ship, and the ship is very, like, ship combat is very much like an all hands on deck kind of thing, where everyone's involved. And in Afterburn, we wanted to build on that. So there's a starship, spaceship manual. In Afterburn, we go into like ship brands, ship manufacturers, ship types, classifications. But it's all still very vibes based. It's not like, I've got this brand of ship and therefore it's X.
It's a +2 to shields.
Faster.
And
yeah. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, this is a brand famous for making things cheaply, so they tend to break more often. Or this is a brand that it made very good ships, but went bankrupt due to the personal failings of the owners, and therefore the parts are hard to get these days.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, it's still a very vibes based book, but it's giving people some of the stuff that they wanted more of. And androids are in there as well. The sandbox setting adventure that's in there is set in a system that has kind of like revolutionized android tech to a level that they are like replicants from Blade Runner, and therefore you can play as one. And the way that you do, and this might actually be the first place that this reaches the public before they get the book, is that you can play them as incognizant, or I can't remember what the other word that we decided on was, awakened, essentially. And you either, and that's a trouble that you have as an android. You either know you're an android and you accept that for whatever it's worth to you, or you don't know it, and it is a big sort of breakdown or revelation or shock waiting to happen, because obviously you can't hide it from the player. I suppose the GM could if they wanted to. That'd be cool, but it's a case of, are you okay with what you are? Are you not okay with what you are? Do you even know what you are if you have been built by a corporation, and then you were built by a corporation to do a job, but then a couple of years ago, a lawsuit meant that you had your data banks wiped, and now you have a house and a husband or a wife, whatever have you, and you're just kind of going about that office job, not knowing that if you get hit by a car, the car's going to come off worse than you are. Or, for example, you're an interstellar outlaw who is incredibly gifted with a certain brand of technology, almost like you can intrinsically know what it's doing or how it's working, but you don't know why you're able to do that. And maybe it's best not to know why you're doing that. This whole thing of like, is Deckard a replicant, is kind of like an undercurrent theme to the androids in Afterburn. Are you not? And in doing that, it lets players who want to play out their little like android characters if they want. But then if you want something that's a bit more like psychological, you can still do that. And as I've said to people who have asked on the Discord, like, how roboty are the androids? My answer is they're up to you still, because these androids that we're introducing as player characters in Afterburn are implied to be made by or from the schematics, patents, and plans from one particular company that's in this adventure setting of the Tennessee Five that's in Afterburn. And so it adds another thing to character creation that you can do if you want, but also in terms of the vibes way, if your GM says, I don't want androids in this campaign, then it's easy to do, because we just say in Afterburn, like, maybe the technology for androids this advanced hasn't reached the part of the galaxy that you're playing in, or people here don't, pirates don't smuggle in android parts. Nobody makes them around here. Your area of the galaxy is too poor for android manufacturers, whatever. Again, going back to this whole thing of plug and play, not everyone who owns Orbital Blues will have to own Afterburn. It's just things that we couldn't fit into the core book that people have asked us for since, or things that we wanted to get out there after the fact. and we put them all together. We presented it on Kickstarter and said, hey, who's interested? And we blew past the original amount of money that we made for Orbital Blues by a good margin. So clearly people were interested in getting all that additional stuff. And we've spent the last almost a year now polishing it up, and I believe that at the time of talking it's going to the printers ready to be like distributed, shipped, etc. But I will not say any more on that because that's very much like a thing that we talk about through the Kickstarter, and Zach handles as a distributions person. But yeah, it's coming, and it's got more stuff in it that you can use or not use at your discretion in your games of Orbital Blues to make characters a little bit spicier, a bit more robotic if you want. It's got new troubles and gambits for androids in it. And it's got a lot of like advice that we have been able to write from several years now of the game being out. Like there's a section on how to GM space as a thing. There's a section on like making the ship feel really real and technical and alive as a place and as a space. There's advice on running jobs and adventures in there that we couldn't really have written to the extent that we did in the core book, simply because, it was lockdown and we didn't have that amalgamated knowledge of a network of different storytellers and GMs running games in different styles. But now we do. So here's a little section on it to help people along with running their games of Orbital Blues. Because it's a big question that we often face on the Discord, is like, oh, well, I've got this book, but I'm struggling to think of an adventure, or I've got a great idea for an adventure, but I'm not sure if I'm confident enough to run it, etc. And we wanted to address like both sides of that coin, both sides of those concerns, and just like put our thoughts into words in that book. And yeah, it's got a lot of good stuff in it.
Very cool. Nice. It sounds like we're pretty much ready to dive into character creation for the game. Yeah. All right. Are we ready to make some people?
Can do.
I'm ready.
Let's make some people.
I'm so excited.
Let's make some people.
Where do we start?
Yes.
Probably page 7 of the book, which reads character creation. That is a good place to start.
What a great title for that section.
Yeah, I know.
It's really creative.
Very original. So, character creation. There's some flavor there on page 7. But on page 8, we have a good piece of advice. Concept. Before getting into any mechanisms, think of the kind of character you want to play and what stands out about them. Use this as the base to build a simple, robust character concept. After all, if everything goes to plan, they could be around for a while and develop quite the reputation in the Frontier Galaxy. The root concept could be something as simple as a character name, or something unique about their appearance or actions, like the way they always keep their hair coiffed and their jacket neat, or how they're always getting into debt collecting vinyl records. And then on the next page, after that, pages 9 and 10, you have D100 of character names. So if you want to roll a D100 for a character name, you can do.
Oh, yes.
I
do love rolling dice.
Yeah, we love to roll on random tables. Let's grab some. See what we get here.
All right. So my character's name is Kit.
Cool.
Got Charlie.
I like it. Ooh.
All right. So they're not like particularly gendered names. They could go any which way, but they give you a basis to work from. So on that section we have.
What about yourself?
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, you
myself.
Get to make one too.
Roll my dice. I got. I got 85 raise. So this table is a mixture of names that would typically be surnames or forenames. some of them are even more ambiguous than that. It's a good list for rolling on. We wanted it to be pretty big for the names ones. And at the bottom of the name section, we have pulling it together. Once you have a concept and a name, think about what led this individual to the life of an interstellar outlaw, or what is about to lead them down that path. Think about the problems that might face your character and how they would go about solving or surviving them. Now, none of us here have actually come up with a character yet. We just have a name. So do either of you have like archetypes or kind of templates of characters that you typically like to play in RPGs? Like I have a friend who only ever plays rogues in whatever fashion a rogue appears in that setting. He will be a rogue, and he will usually have points in charisma as well, because as a person he can't keep his mouth shut, and that always bleeds into his character. So do either of you two have characters that you typically like to play in a game?
I really like to play face characters. That's
cool.
Yeah.
Because I always end up talking anyway, so I might as well lead into that.
Yeah. Makes sense.
In like, especially like sci-fi settings, I really like playing the techie.
Cool.
Somebody that's into the tech and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
what about you?
For myself, it depends on the kind of game. I do like to take the techie archetype and put it into other kind of settings, like fantasy, for example. One of my first run-ins with with Dungeons and Dragons. So Dungeons and Dragons was not my first RPG. My first RPG was Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd Edition, which some people will be like, ooh, yeah, like go wild for. It's a fun game. That was my introduction to RPGs way back when. And I was into RPGs for quite a few years before I ever actually played a game of Dungeons and Dragons. And I came to play it, and my GM said, "What do you want to be?" And I was like, "I want to be a blacksmith." And there isn't a single skill in that game related to actually making things. It's all about breaking and taking. And that was probably, my first exposure to Dungeons and Dragons as a system immediately turned me off it, because he was like, "Oh, well, you could be an artificer, I guess." And I'm like, "No, I want to be a blacksmith." "Oh, there's no skills for that." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Guess I'm just a really strong guy then who does blacksmithing in his spare time."
Right.
And he was like, "Yeah, sure." He wasn't the most attentive GM, but whenever I had the chance, I would go off and I would go and make things. I would fix the party's equipment, which he would often just do off of like, "Oh yeah, make a strength roll or like an endurance or whatever it was, to like, run the forge and do the blacksmithing stuff." So yeah, I like playing techie types in some games, depending on how well I know the setting. But I also just like, if someone said to me, like, gun to my head, like, what's my favorite archetype to play, I just like a fighter. I think a fighter is a really open archetype that you can take in tons of different directions. And I think when it comes to adding flavor and description and role play to your character, I think a fighter gives you a really blank canvas of how you describe things and how you go about solving problems. So I play fighters with some face. In this instance, I'm going to keep sticking with the random rolls and see what emerges. So there are 3 stats in Orbital Blues: muscle, grit, and savvy. And just to give you a brief explanation for those listening, muscle determines the strength of your arm and the bulk under your jacket. It is the force behind the switchblade, and it determines how much or how little blood comes out if you're on the wrong end. Using muscle in play could mean forcing open a door, hitting something or someone, or undertaking some heavy lifting. A character with high muscle could be well built, in peak physical fitness, or packing a cybernetic arm or two. A character with low muscle might be frail, thinly built, or out of shape. So with only 3 stats, we didn't want to make it feel like pointing into any one of those put you in a sort of caricature kind of way. So we've always added these little explanations of what it might represent to have low or high in these skills. Because I think sometimes it's easy to think like, oh, a character who is low in, I have to play it as stupid. It's not. It's that character maybe just doesn't think about things intellectually. But if you were to meet them in real life, it doesn't mean they're stupid. They just are more knowledgeable about things you might not consider intellectual, or they might just have a different way of thinking about things that leans more towards wisdom or experience. And so muscle is like physicality as a stat. And then you have grit, the next one. Grit is your ability to never give up and never give in. It is the tenacity to chase the intergalactic dream and the will to watch one's friends come and go with the passing of the years. It determines a character's ability to stand for themselves or keep on when the chips are down. In play, grit could be used to resist pain, continue on with arduous tasks without rest, or keep a straight face during a high-stakes game. A character with high grit could be a grizzled veteran, a methodical doctor, or a stone-cold broker. A character with low grit could be cowardly, flippant, or indecisive. So that one is kind of like a mix of endurance, stamina, but also strength of character as well. It is grit in like the sense of the word. Savvy, which is the third and final main stat. Savvy is the speed of your arm, the pull of your trigger finger. It is the speed of the cat and the wit of the Joker. Savvy represents attributes based around both physical and mental agility. It could be used to lie about why a debt hasn't been paid, as well as being used to see how fast you can draw your gun when that conversation goes south. Characters with high savvy might be charismatic, graceful, or resourceful. A character with low savvy might be clumsy, dim-witted, or simply obtuse. Player characters tend to be very good at one thing, pretty good at another, and average at a third. To represent this, allocate +2 to one stat, +1 to another, and +0 to the final one. Note that these stats are beyond those of the average person, but average people tend not to last long in the Frontier Galaxy. So
it makes a lot of sense. Yeah,
your character is above average, but they're not superhuman. And, you know, a lot of the NPCs in the book tend to be like +1, +1, +0. You get that +2 because you're a little something special. So how are you two going to allocate your stats?
I mean, I think my 0 goes in muscle.
Okay.
Grit and savvy.
I mean, if you want to be the face character, it feels like savvy might be your best sort of attribute there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like savvy is probably the best one for that. For a techie, savvy also plays into that, but also grit or muscle could also come into play with techie stuff if you're being like an engineer or you're
sometimes hitting it really hard is actually all the ship needs.
Or you're down in the bowels of like the ship's engine where it's really hot and hard to be in. That would be grit. You're lifting a lot of heavy things. That would be muscle. But also, you know, if you're like working on computers and connecting the right wires together, that's savvy. How you choose to use these in the game is often just at how you go about describing something, and then the GM will say, okay, well, make that a savvy check or make that a grit check. Some people have said, oh, I feel like savvy is a real load-bearing skill, and if you pump savvy, you can be good at most things Orbital Blues throws at you, and it's actually just that you can think of ways to go about things in a savvy way often more than you could think about things in going about them a muscle kind of way or a grit kind of way. But everything exists in equal opportunity. If we so have written in the mechanics that savvy is used more often than others, then GMs can just fix that problem very easily and be like, oh, actually, no, we're going to make that a grit check today. Or actually, I think that's more of a muscle thing. That's more physical than it is savvy. So, assign your stats as you see fit. For myself, I'm going to come back to those once I've rolled on some more tables and got a bit more of an idea of the kind of character I'm going to make.
All right.
I went with Savvy for my +2.
Nice.
Because I wanted somebody that's very resourceful, very knowledgeable about the systems that they are kind of interacting with, and a little bit of that charisma as well. But then I went Muscle for my +1.
Nice.
But I wanted my grit to be 0 because I wanted this person to kind of, once the personal pressure was on, to kind of like crumble a little. Because I wanted them to be like the techie that, like the guy in the van sort of trope, right?
Right, yeah.
Where you're not on the front lines of the battlefield, you're behind the computer screen doing all the cool, like, hackery sort of stuff, right?
Yeah.
But as soon as stuff starts getting personal,
every time you have to go undercover, you're like, yes, I am here to deliver a pizza. This is a pizza, definitely a pizza that I have. I am not wearing a wire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're great undercover.
Exactly. So yeah, I that's where I'm thinking of putting my stuff there.
Cool.
All right.
And what about the face? Where are you putting your stats? Savvy?
Yeah. So yes, I did +2 in savvy and +1 in grit, and then my 0 in muscle.
So I think this is a good sort of reflection of a table here. You've got 2 people who know what they want based on like archetypes they enjoy playing and how they're going to go about representing them. I'm playing the indecisive role here. When I just before we started recording, I started thinking up a character, and then I thought, no, I'm not going to do that because we wrote all of these random tables in the book, and I want to do something a bit more exciting than coming in and explaining a character that I thought up ahead of time. There are also people who sit down at a table to play a game and they just don't know what kind of character they want to play. Like,
Absolutely.
The rest of the table might have decided on the game that they're playing without them, or they've not read the material before the game started. I'm role playing as that person right now.
Excellent. Yeah, let's show it off for sure.
I think this next part is going to help me. Because next we move on to the section called The Crew, which is about the ensemble element of the crew. And so this part reads, ship crews and character ensembles are a core pillar of space westerns, with characters' bonds and relationships forming much more of the internal momentum of narrative when ships are flying between gigs and deals, or when characters drown their sorrows in the local dive bar after those gigs go south. After outlining a character concept, you should talk with the other players and see what kind of concepts they have in mind. Collectively, you could formulate pre-existing bonds or past jobs those characters have undertaken together, or cook up a plot of how they fall together in the first session. To help with this, take at least one of the titles from the following page and think about how it relates to your character. Then take another one of the titles and figure out how your character associates it with another character on the crew. Whatever you come up with, be sure to do it collaboratively and ensure everyone's satisfied and comfortable with the roles, stories, and relations they'll be assuming when play begins. So it's interesting that already you've referred to yourself as the techie and the face. And what this next part is essentially giving characters those monikers in a very kind of like, you have a crime film and everyone's got a hot moniker like that, like, oh, that's the driver, that's the shooter. This is a section that I had very early on in the inception of Orbital Blues. And so on pages 15 and 16, what you have is a nice colorful red through to green gradient. But all across this page is a bunch of titles in no particular kind of layout, all in different fonts, and some are slightly bigger or smaller than the others, but they're all scattered there. Lone did a great job in the layout of this, and all of them are titles like The Survivor, The Gambler, The Dreamer, The Artist, The Arm, The Lover, The Brains, etc.
I feel like some of them are like very clear cut, like what they are, and then there are some in here that you're like, like the Yankee, the Dancer, that are not as clear. Yeah,
so some of them I put in just because I thought they sounded cool. Some of them are little references. Like the Yankee is actually a double part with the Yankee and the Brave, which was a reference to a Run the Jewels album that had just come out at the time, that I was really enjoying. So I was like, yeah, sure, stick that in there. Need to fill more space. And then others are like ones that you would get in the genre, like The Driver or The Wheels. And then some others are gonna force you to think, like you've got The Freak or The Ears, The Smoker. They're going to give you character. So what I've got here is an opportunity to sort of like take some inspiration, looking at this like big list of what I might want to play.
Well, and like I know the face is on here, but there are also a bunch on here that like are face type characters that like, like the actor or that like are a little more creatively expressive or vibey.
the techie here mentioned about being the guy who sits in the van and like hangs back.
Right.
That to me, in relation to what monikers would your character know the root of the crew by, that to me says like The Ears. That's the guy who sits in the van and like listens to what's going on. But it could also be like looking at the list. He could be the mechanic as well, depending on how I see the techie.
I mean, you could also be the driver. It depends on what kind of tech you're working on,
What I'm going to do here is I've got a scatter dice. So for those not in the know, it is a kind of dice for playing Warhammer, or rather the older editions of Warhammer, and each face of the dice has got an arrow on it, and you apart from two which have got a target on them, which means that's on the dot. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll this dice on this spread, and whatever words the arrow points to, I'm going to build a character concept around that. So here's my scatter dice here, which I have just shown to the camera, and I'm just going to roll it across this spread. And I have ended up with it pointing to the words "the actor," which is next to the muse, the smoker, the cleaner. So it could realistically have ended up on any of those, but this arrow very firmly points to the actor.
Nice.
And that's what I'm going to build a character concept around. I'm gonna go with that. And to just backtrack a little bit from that immediately, I am going to put 2 in grit. I'm going to put 1 in muscle, and I'm going to put none in savvy.
Interesting.
And I'm going to see how I can bend the actor, like moniker.
That's very cool.
What are you thinking, Ryan?
I've got a couple in mind, but I think I want to go a little bit more sad and poetic.
Okay.
So I think that the top of my list is The Lonely Heart.
That's very you. I am. Color me shocked.
I know, right? So I think this person chooses to kind of isolate themselves for whatever reason. And that's why they like to be behind the screens instead of on the front lines or whatever.
Nice.
I think I'm going to go with the twist. I don't know what it means yet, but
well, you're not supposed to find out until like the middle of Act 3.
Right. Yeah. That's when that happens.
I've got something. I've got an idea. It's just hit me in the face.
Yes.
And I'm going to go.
No, I'm sorry. The twist, not the face.
Oh, I'm going to go with a +2 in muscle and +1 in grit and nothing in savvy.
Oh, that is intriguing. Are you like an acrobat?
I'm going to go with a big himbo. He looks great. He's in excellent shape.
Nice.
And he's trying to make it, or he tried to make it as an actor, but he's just got no charisma on screen.
But he does really well in like daytime soap operas.
Maybe. He's got grit because he keeps going and he keeps pursuing that dream, and he's had the grit to get in that shape and maintain that shape. But the best he's ever going to really get is a stunt actor. Not to downplay the work of stunt actors, by the way, for all the stunt actors out there listening. But this guy, you don't want this guy reading lines. You don't want this guy having to remember the script.
But he keeps submitting tapes. No matter how many rejections.
100%. And, acting, it's not paying the bills, and that's why he's going into this work of being an interstellar outlaw.
But he's so nice that his agent doesn't want to, say no.
An agent? You think this guy's got an agent? I feel like...
Oh, I'm his agent.
I feel like the techie or the face is he's probably going to be his agent.
I'll be his agent.
I can't afford an agent. In this economy. So yeah, and that is a part of the character creation that we're really proud of, is getting this moniker and it encouraging these kinds of conversations of you're the quick, or you're the face, or you're the heartthrob. I've taken the actor and I could have said, that could have been the face, but I'm going to take that in the opposite direction. He's known as the actor because of what he's not doing, or what he's trying to do.
Yeah, I like they're very evocative. And like I said, some of them seem really straightforward, but also, as you have just proven, no, not necessarily.
Yeah. Because they're nicknames, and sometimes
the
people
actor is garbage at acting.
Yeah, sometimes people have nicknames for the wrong reasons. Someone burns something at a barbecue. Oh yeah, he's the chef. It's a wind-up name, and they're the kinds of bonds and relationships that they're personal and they're intimate, and you want to have those as part of a crew that spends all of their time in a confined space together going through space. They're inevitably going to have those. So, yeah. All right. Let's go over the characters that we've got so far. I've just explained mine.
Yep. And I've got Kit. I'm going to go with she, her for Kit. The Lonely Heart. More comfortable behind the screens, doing tech work and working with computers than working with people for the most part. Much more comfortable not having bullets flying her way.
Yeah.
For sure.
I've got Charlie. I'm going to say they, them. What a twist. You never know. I've got, high savvy, mid grit, muscle. No. And I don't know what the twist is, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay. Nice.
There's something.
Call to action.
Yeah, like that.
I really love the way that the character creation in this system works out. We get into a little bit of it here, and the remainder of it is coming next week's episode. But it is very short and succinct and creative, and there's a couple of really interesting ways to go about it. And Sam was an absolute delight walking us through this. I had a lot of fun with this, and I can really see how a lot of different character concepts and tropes you can lean into can work in this system. So definitely stay tuned next time for the end of this, as we get to finish our characters and even get to make our ship, which is very exciting. But before we let you go for the day, we do have some calls to action. There's a few, so please pay attention because they are big time events for the network. So first up, coming on Tuesday, August 13th, that is tomorrow, the day this episode releases, Starwhal Odyssey starts releasing to the public. This is huge for me. These episodes are freshly remastered and fully produced to match up to later episodes in the series. It will be a whole new experience for those who have heard these episodes before, and it will be fantastic for everybody. I am very proud of what we've put together. And I should probably mention, for those that don't know, I did the editing for this series, and it is an absolute pleasure working with James, Mel, Allie, and Drew, the stars of the show. Every single week that I'm able to pull together their audio into some new, fun, amazing stuff. I really hope you tune in and spread the word. This is a space fantasy actual play that is only bound by the imagination. It's just phenomenal. It will release every other week right here on the One Shot Podcast Network. In addition to that, also on the network, there's James's other podcast, the Ultimate RPG Podcast, which started this last week. And the first episode goes over character creation and world building exercises with Dylan Apalian. Dylan is the host of the One Shot Podcast now, and they really get into some great character creation and world building there. So check that out as well. And finally, for more network news, if that's not enough, there is also a Kickstarter that is launching tomorrow for the first one-shot network RPG anthology. Over the last year, Tracy Barnett has been working with many talented game designers to bring new RPGs to the One Shot Patreon book club. And this is your chance now to get these exclusive games for yourself. We're going to have links to all of this in the show notes, so definitely check it out. There's a lot going on. If you like what we're doing here, though, and want to support our show, please head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/charactercreationcast and sign up for any of our basic tiers as a free trial. Each level has a ton of great rewards as associated with it, and you can join things like our Sticker of the Month Club at $10, where you get a new sticker every month that we're able to do that. Usually the stickers are going to be in theme of the series that we covered that month. You can also get some custom C3 dice and a personalized thank you card handcrafted by Amelia herself for $5 and up, as well as chit chats every week that we're able to do them for $1 and up. We also started releasing bonus outtakes for all of our patrons, even at the free level. So there is no reason not to head on over there and at least join up as a free member. We also like to thank all of our patrons personally every episode. You all mean the world to us. So let's go ahead and get started on that. DJ G, aka Tigranosaurus, Eric Bonts, and Daryl Holiday II, thank you all so much. Shadim Cabal, The Shyest Barbarian, and Benjamin Sweeney, thanks for your continued support. Thank you, Lorcan McInnes, Rob Fletcher, and Kevin Brown. We couldn't do this without you. Tentacle Duck, John Adamus, and A3 Sketchpad, thanks for supporting our dreams. Thanks, Cole McCallum, Carlos Salazar, and Eric S. So glad to have you backing us. Ian Potmeyer, Sorry Goth, and Liam G, our deepest thanks to you. We're glad to have you here, Brian Colum, Garden GM, and Tanglefoot. Thanks for supporting. Many thanks to Blue Kryptonite, Danny, and Nicole Trainer. Liam Murray, Kenning, and Brian Kurtz. Thanks for helping us make this show. And Mark E. Fair and Drew Owen, we are so grateful to you. Thank you. And thank you to all of our future patrons. Your support means the absolute world to us. Every bit of support here helps tremendously, and we are incredibly grateful to all of you. If you are already supporting the Patreon or can't afford to do so right now and still want to show your support for the show, the next best way to do so is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Podchaser, Podcast Addict, or even Facebook. We'll read your review right here and thank you personally. That's all that we have for today's episode. It's a big series this time, so we get part 3 of our character creation next week, where we finish the characters and get to actually create our ship. We didn't want to cut any of the fantastic discussion along the way either, so you get all of it. Stay tuned next week for all of that, but until then, take care, everyone. Stay safe, drink some water, and keep making those amazing people. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for joining us for part 2 of this character creation series. We'll be back in part 3, picking up right where we left off.
Character Creation Cast is a production of the One Shot Podcast Network and can be found online at www.charactercreationcast.com. Head to the website to get more information on our hosts, this show, and even our press kit. Character Creation Cast can also be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at CreationCast, or on our Discord server at discord.charactercreationcast.com. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Bolter, and I can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Lord Neptune or online at lordneptune.com. Our other host, Amelia Antrim, can be found on Twitter and Blue Sky at Ginger Reckoning. Music for this episode is used with a Creative Commons license or with permission from the podcast they originated from. Further information can be found within the show notes. Our main theme music is Hero Remix by Steve Combs and is used with a Creative Commons license. This podcast is owned by us under Creative Commons. This episode was edited by Ryan Bolter. Further information for the game systems used and today's guests can also be found in the show notes. If you'd like to support our show, find us on Patreon. Get access to bonus episodes, exclusive merch, and much more at patreon.com/charactercreationcast. Thanks for joining us. And remember, we find that the best part of any role-playing game is character creation. So go out there and create some amazing people. We'll see you next time.